All right, I think we're good to go. Got all of our electronic connections connected and all of our peopled, and we're all set. So, good morning, everyone. Before the meeting begins, I'm going to ask our interpreters to provide instructions on how to use the interpretation feature. So I'll pass it off to our interpreter.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app from a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo y seleccione español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom desde su celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the May 6, 2024 Military Working Group meeting. My name is Deputy Mayor Steve Goebel from the City of El Cajon, and I'll be kicking off today's meeting. Before we begin, though, I would like to ask Tessa, who is serving as our clerk, to confirm if we have a quorum.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, we do have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Tessa. Before we begin our agenda items, I'd like to review the meeting process for both the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to participate. As a reminder, no comments with the use of loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting will be tolerated. The amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment will be limited to 2 minutes. And this allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. In order to speak on any agenda item, members of the public will need to submit a speaker slip for each agenda item in advance, and virtual public will need to raise their hand in the Zoom platform. For working group members, when you would like to speak, just raise your hand and that will be good enough and I'll call on you by name. So before we begin the meeting, do any members of the working group have any questions on the meeting procedures? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Would you join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, item number 1, Chair's report. Members of the public will have an opportunity to address that as well. So before we get into the Chair's report, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. I do have one public commenter on this item. The original draw, please go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, so, I just find it really interesting and quite disturbing that we have such a crazy invasion going on our border, and we have military all around us, and we, have all of these avenues that could stop it. Instead, we're helping facilitate it. And we could be in the range of 5,000 per day coming up, especially this summer. I mean, we're already at 2,000 a day. And I just don't understand why so many people across the county can sit and act like nothing's going on, that there's not a problem, that there aren't, military-aged men coming across, that there aren't children that come across unaccompanied and go missing, that a little girl hasn't been raped already by an illegal. And it's just like we're living in 2 different worlds, and it's really sad to see, because this is, set to destroy our nation. And that's the whole point of it. And it's just really upsetting that you can have so many officials or just even people in the community. And part of it is that the mainstream media doesn't tell the people the truth, nor do the officials. And so people, you know, are thinking and putting it under the guise of like helping humanity. Well, you can't destroy a nation just to help humanity. And that's what's happening. And other cities that they go to from our county are experiencing severe crimes. And more is going to happen in San Diego. More than just a little 5-year-old being raped, more than people being murdered. And it's sad because it shouldn't have to be you or your family for it to matter. But it seems like that's what's happening because everybody is willfully and blatantly ignoring a severe issue.
On your time expired, that concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Some items from the chair's report this morning. I'm pleased to announce that Mario Orso has been appointed the new CEO of SANDAG. He will start June 17th. This is April, just as we have somebody joining the organization, we have somebody leaving the group, but not the organization. This is April's last meeting. Thank you for your contributions to making us all working well together. And she will be replaced by Mariela Rodriguez, the leading coordinator for the group. So welcome, Marietta, and let's thank April for their time and contributions. In your own jurisdictions, the military working group charter allows for one or more alternate members to be added to the roster. So if you want to add any additional alternates, please reach out to Mariela and let her know who you'd like those to be. Mark Balmert has retired from the SDMAT community recently and will be joined by the interim president and CEO, Paul Perigin. Paul, good morning and welcome. While they conduct their executive search for Mark's replacement. Welcome, Paul. Glad to have you. Any words that you want to share? You're good. Okay. Of course. Next item, the FY24 Congressionally Directed Spending Awards FUD bill includes SANDAG's at-rail crossing elimination study, the Barrio Logan Freeway lid parks, the I-15 SR-78 HOV and managed lanes, the San Ysidro Mobility Hub, and the I-5 managed lanes southbound segment 5. The FUD, by the way, is Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. Thank goodness there are no military bills named the FUD bill. That would just not be quite the same. Staff presented to the Regional Planning Committee this past Friday to share information about working groups that report to this Policy Advisory Committee. And over the next few months, we're hoping to enhance the collaboration between our military working group and the Regional Planning Committee. Lastly, SANDAG Sustainable Transportation Services Team loves collaborating with each of the bases as a frequent Diamond Award recipient. We hope you can continue spreading the word to participate in Bike Anywhere Day on May 16th, just in 10 days. And we are excited to see several bases sponsor several pit stops this year. That sounds kind of fun. Participants can sign up for a chance to win an e-bike and a t-shirt. Okay, public comments. We'll now go to non-agenda public comment and member public comments. Tessa, do we have any public comments on non-agenda items?
We already did non-agenda public comments, Chair.
Okay, we're good there. Members, any comments you want to add about things going on in your agencies? Anything new, anything interesting? Yes, Eric.
Good morning, sir. Your mic. Can you hear me?
Got it.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Erica Cortez, CEO with Imperial Beach. Just a quick announcement. Imperial Beach City Council recently adopted an ordinance to establish Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. At a local level, as you may know, Imperial Beach does have a large workforce of military residents as well. And so we're hoping to appoint the committee by June 5th. And it's basically helping anybody who is active or retired and various resources. So you may be invited, some of you may be invited to speak or provide some information. So that's all I wanted to share.
Good information. Thank you, Erica. Anybody else? Yes, Tony.
Good morning, everyone. Tony Winnie, City of Coronado. Just a couple of quick updates from us. One is we've been working very closely with the Regional Water Quality Control Board on the spread of cholera in San Diego Bay. So just a quick update. They had done some additional surveys recently. They had been working on eradicating the cholera from the area of the caves where it was originally found. They've been making great progress on that front. However, they did an additional survey recently and found that it is spreading. And so we've put in for some different grant resources to help combat or support the eradication efforts. And so we're going to be working with the control board and a number of other resource agencies to stay on top of that and try and stem the spread of it in the Bay. So we've got about $1 million already allocated to that effort, and we're going to continue that work to make sure that we don't see it spread further into the Bay, particularly into the wildlife refuge. So that's one update I wanted to provide. The other one is, as many of you know, Coronado has been working very closely with Imperial Beach and a number of other agencies, including the port, to advocate for additional funding to support improvements to the International Water Treatment Plant that is run by the IBWC. This has been an ongoing issue for decades now, and of course, really has a number of different impacts, not only on Coronado, but the Navy and other entities here in San Diego. And we are doing everything that we can to try and make sure that we attract additional resources to make sure those improvements are made. So I want to thank Imperial Beach and the Navy and a number of other folks working with us on that project to try and get additional federal funding. President Biden did sign an appropriations bill to devote an additional $156 million for the construction budget of IBWC in March. So we're really excited that we've got that funding now coming forward, in addition to the $300 million that was previously allocated. Unfortunately, as of this morning, if you saw the article in the UT by Ms. Geiner, who runs the IBWC, they are now saying that it's probably going to cost more like $1 billion when all is said and done for the improvements to the South Bay treatment plant. So we're going to be working with our federal delegation to try and get some additional funding, probably an additional $200 million requests going into the federal budget for this most recent round for fiscal year 25. So anyone who is interested in working with Coronado and some of our other agencies around the table, please let me know. We are always looking for partners to support those efforts. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Yes, Amy.
Good morning. My name is Amy Heim. I'm here representing the Port of San Diego, and I just would like to endorse the comments of my colleague to my right. The Port is really grateful to be part of a very collaborative group and multi-agency group dealing with both Culebra and Tijuana River Valley. So thank you very much for your comments. I also just want to note that the Port recently broke ground on Freedom Park at Navy Pier. This project is a long time coming. Also, it's the fruit of a long-term collaboration and partnership with the Midway Museum. We're very excited to see it underway. At its completion, the park will be on the west end of Navy Pier and wrap around the Midway and connect back into the Bob Hope Memorial. So thank you all for your support, and happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Yep, Jim.
From MCRD San Diego, Jim Gurney. Just in light of some of the projects that we have going out there, we have a few construction projects that are going to kick off on the depot this calendar year and move into next fiscal year. And for us, the relatively small footprint, these are pretty big projects. First is our chow hall. We have a consolidated chow hall for all the recruits on the depot. It's going to be about a $93 million project. We're the busiest chow hall in the Marine Corps, and it is a single point of failure in the recruit training if it goes down. So it's got some years on it, and we've finally been awarded that. Breaks ground here in a couple of months in 2024, and we're excited to see that moving on. We're also going to kind of enhance the quality of our medical services with a new medical and dental facility. Right now, those two institutions are split. Recruits have to move a pretty good distance to get from one to the other. We're going to put them together in about an $80 million project. So we'll have good state-of-the-art modern medical facilities for the recruits who are going through. Many of you know, we also fairly recently integrated recruit training at the MCRD San Diego and integrated with females being trained at MCRD. At one point, all females were trained at Parris Island for the Marine Corps. That's changed. We now do half of the females at MCRD. Required us to build another barracks to support some of the population that's coming in. So that's about another $90 million project or so to build a new barracks. So all of these things are either being awarded or broken ground in 24, and one or two of them may break ground in calendar year 25, but fiscal year 24. So we'll a lot of activity on the depot. Should not be an impact on the community outside of the depot, other than seeing a few additional construction trucks and things moving around. On the recruit training side of the house, we're still doing well. The numbers are ramping up. We get up to about a 7,000 recruit presence on the depot in the summer, which is again pretty large for the piece of ground that we sit on. And right now we're getting ready to really increase those numbers for our summer push. So a lot of activity and getting ready for that. And on the recruiting side of the house, at MCRD, we're the headquarters for the Western Recruiting Region. So we're in charge of all the recruiters on the western half of the United States and out into the Pacific, out to the Japan area. Recruiting's tough, but we are on track to make our recruiting mission again this year due to the efforts of our professional recruiting force. And I can't say enough good things about what they do and how hard they work to make that mission. But we think we're going to pull it out. It's going to be pretty tight towards the end of the year, but we're on track to make that happen. And the last thing, and this is for the board members and the staff here at the working group, we're planning a summer concert and reception on the 18th of July. Just want you guys to note the date now, and we'll put out an invitation for everybody to come out. So if you haven't had the opportunity to come on the depot and see what we do and kind of check it out a little bit, it'd be a great opportunity to do so. And April, thanks for everything you've done. Fair winds, following seas.
Okay, good words, Jim. Thanks. Any others? Yes, Muska.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give a quick update that in April, Navy Region Southwest, along with our installation community plans and liaison officers, attended the Port's Shoreline Atlas Preservation Kickoff Meeting. This is a project that is being funded by Office of Local Defense and Community Cooperation. And the effort will provide us tools to understand the vulnerabilities around San Diego Bay, and then also provide some solutions, both engineering and nature-based solutions to address those vulnerabilities. So I just wanted to thank the Port of San Diego for going after that grant. And I'm looking forward to the project. And I think it will be a win-win for both for the port, for Navy, and the community. Thank you.
For sure. Well, I know that the issue down in Coronado affects not only tourism, but affects military training as well. And just as soon as we get money appropriated, then it seems like we're always chasing increasing costs. So hopefully we can just get started, and that will help bring things in and actually get it done sooner than later. So it's a frustration, I'm sure, for everybody. Okay, let's move on to item 2, which is the consent item agenda. We just have one item on there, and that's the February 12th, 24 meeting minutes. Let me check and see if we have any public comments on this item.
Thank you. We do have public commenters on this item. The original draw, please go ahead.
So in the past minutes, you know, the last meeting I was talking to you about what's going on at the border. And since then, it was around 1,000 per day that we're crossing, and now it's to 2,000. And as I'm hearing you talk about the military and all the things that you're doing to recruit, we're like we're protecting other borders. We're not protecting our own border. And so it's really, it's like there's this disconnect to reality. Many of you are down in the area by the border. You know what's going on, but you're not acknowledging it to the people and making it aware to them of the dangers that this is putting on our community. How can we go and protect other borders, have the military do that and act like that's what we need to be doing when our own border is being breached? It's all intentional. I mean, how can we have a wall and then now we have signs at the airport that say, if you're not a citizen and you don't have a passport, you can use this line. But not everybody could do that. And it's like, why are they getting special treatment unless this was an intentional plan to destroy the nation? And the people that should be protecting it are doing anything but that. They're going to another country to protect their borders. How embarrassing is that? To know that we live in a nation where we are sending money overseas, our military overseas, all while that's happening. And we are like, our homeless are suffering. People are suffering from losing everything from the storm. And they don't get the same treatment as these people who are crossing illegally, committing a federal offense. The fact that we're in a sanctuary status is illegal, 8 USC 13424. It's aiding and abetting the invasion and destruction of our nation. And you guys are all complicit in that. I would hope that you could look into your soul and see what you're doing is wrong and turn away and start protecting our nation.
And that concludes the public comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from members on the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion from any one of you.
Chair Goebel, Mark Ballmer's name is spelled Michael in the minutes, so that correction should be made.
Thank you, Mike.
I just have one minor correction as well. The command that we work for within the Navy is Navy Region Southwest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes with those corrections?
So move.
That was motion by Mike. Is that what I heard down there? And we'll flip a coin. We'll go with Tony for the second. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Thank you. All right, let's go on to item number 3. Since our last meeting in February, excuse me, we were able to schedule tours at Camp Pendleton and the U.S. Coast Guard sector here in San Diego. Very interesting meetings. What a privilege to be able to look at those at all of your bases. Highlights from these tours have been very informative for us and our SANDAG staff. We'd like to revisit some of the recurring themes as we discuss actions for the military working group this year. Tueri, April, and Natasha from SANDAG will revisit recent studies to help guide a discussion about efforts the military working group can lead. So I'll pass this off to SANDAG staff and let you go for it.
Thank you, Chair. Just a correction, Natasha wasn't able to make it today, so Susan here is here to join us. And I just wanted to continue the conversation that we had at the last military working group, where we want these agenda items to be a good use of your time. And we heard that you guys wanted to be educated on projects that were going on that would impact our bases. And we also want to continue the collaboration that we have been historically having, where we have been creating partnerships and looking for funding for new grants that support mission readiness. So a few of you guys have been here when we did do the military multimodal access strategy, which is a Caltrans planning grant, where we met with each of the bases and each of the local jurisdictions to talk about some of the concerns and challenges, and then looked at some priority projects within the San Diego region that were important to support mission readiness. And I think that it's been a few years since we visited that, and going back to each of the bases over the past year has been very helpful to see that there are still continued challenges between partners, but there are also a lot of opportunities. And we've had a few Office of Local Development Communities Cooperation grants that have continued from our initial first 2 phases that Susan will summarize. And there are additional funding opportunities that are happening that we would like this group to collaborate on and prioritize some focus areas and maybe continue working together as a team to to utilize these agenda items more effectively and also maybe enhance the communication we have between the military working group and the regional planning committee. So I'm going to pass it on to Susan to just remind us of what we did as part of the military installation resilience phases 1 and 2, and then we can talk a little bit more about the funding opportunities that are available for this group to consider.
Do you want me to run through these, April, or you had already mentioned these? I'm going to just say I like seeing the pictures on here. But and Natasha did wish that she was able to make it here today. She had an urgent family matter. So I'm the climate planning manager on the team, and Natasha's part of the team and was doing a great job collaborating with many of you in the room today. So here we are on the Military Installation Resilience Project. And just a quick overview, this happened in 2 phases over several years. It was funded from a grant from the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, or the OLDCC. And the overall project goal was to address climate change impacts that could affect transportation corridors that serve local installations and ultimately harm efforts to remain mission ready. So during the phase 1 of the grant, SANDAG worked with Navy Region Southwest and project team stakeholders, including staff from the local governments, to complete an initial assessment of climate-related threats to military installations in the region. 10 areas were analyzed, as well as surrounding transportation assets. And in the end of phase 1, 3 key areas or corridors were selected for further study and analysis. So for phase 2, which we're seeing a graphic of up on the slide here, the team focused on 3 study areas, which include State Route 75, 282, Harbor Drive, and Pacific Highway. An MIR framework, or Military Installation Resilience Framework, was developed that shows the analysis of these corridors and provides recommendations to increase resilience planning efforts across the military, local governments, and SANDAG. The framework breaks recommendations into 3 areas. The first was a data inventory and MIR hub. And this is a website that's used for data gathering and monitoring, and it allows stakeholders to review related resources and houses some GIS data on current and future potential flooding risks and what the flooding levels are along the corridors. And SANDAG is hopeful to support continued collaboration between the military and us on collecting data and with the local governments. The next area was a set of recommendations looked into resilient infrastructure solutions. This included nature-based solutions as well as civil engineering solutions. A lot in the past has always been around civil engineering, building seawalls, levees, and such. And now we see the state, local governments, everyone really making a shift to try and be more nature-based and sustainable. This looked at timeframes also along the corridors for when maybe trigger points arise, say increases in the magnitude and the amount of times of flooding that happens that impacts infrastructure and corridors. And these are all housed in the framework online at the MIR Hub website. And then the last category of recommendations in the framework were on sustainable transportation strategies or ways to reduce the vehicle miles traveled for people coming to and from bases. So this included looking at active transportation like sidewalk improvements and bike routes, as well as public transportation improvements and incentives available to get folks to consider trying transit. A vehicle miles traveled, or VMT toolkit, was also developed for this and included in the framework materials. So all the project documents are available online for review on the SANDAG website. If you just go to sandag.org/climate, scroll down and you'll see this right there. But I'm going to pass it back to April at this point.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for reminding me we had a PowerPoint presentation. So I know that a lot of you were part of the Military Installation Resilience Grants, and maybe I can ask you to share a little bit about your experience and how that led to other grant programs. But overall, as we've moved forward with each of these projects, we've we were able to get to the next phase and increase the amount of projects that we as a region can do to support mission readiness. We've had several follow-up discussions with the Navy, and we are going to continue them with SDMAC as we talk about data collection and other issues. We also brought in some of the key topics that we heard that you wanted to hear about as it relates to housing and transportation. And just so you know, I want to applaud this group that we are a case study for other military jurisdictions throughout the country. And we've been called several times to share what we've been doing as a military working group, because we have been very effective in working together and moving projects forward and having that collaboration between local jurisdictions and military bases, which is a challenge in every other region. So I want to applaud you for working on these projects and collaborating. And then I also want to share a few more funding opportunities. I think Musta, you shared us the REPI project, and if you could say a few words on that or any of the projects that you have been working on with military installation resilience.
Sure. Actually, I do have a brief for the REPI, and I can provide some more information on that. So the Department of Defense DoD Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration, or REPI program, preserves military missions by supporting cost-sharing agreements between military services, other federal agencies, state and local governments, and private conservation organizations. REPI program was launched in fiscal year 2003 when Congress gave the military services the authority to enter into agreements with qualified organizations and non-federal agencies to limit encroachment by enacting Section 2684A of Title 10 of the USC. Congress expanded the 2684A authority in fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act to include agreements that enhance or improve military installation resilience. Under this authority, qualified partners include state, local governments, or private conservation organizations. The authority allows cost-sharing partnership to acquire real property interests for one of the three purposes. One, to limit any development or use that is incompatible with the mission of the installation. Secondly, to preserve habitat to relieve current or anticipated restriction on military activities. And lastly, to enhance or improve military installation resilience from extreme weather events or from changes in environmental conditions that may impact military activities. So REPI program engages our partners and stakeholders to not only help us understand their mission, but at the same time for our partners to understand the military mission and importance of that mission. The net result is more conservation of natural resources, better land use planning, and longer-term benefits for communities, stakeholders, and the military. And REPI projects are normally identified by the installation, or sometimes our partners will come to us with a REPI project recommendation. But the Office of Secretary of Defense provides overarching REPI program policy and guidance and administers REPI funding and oversees reporting and tracking of the REPI projects. I just wanted to highlight that Navy Region Southwest has been very successful in leveraging REPI program to protect, restore, enhance off-base natural infrastructure and sustain military mission capabilities across all 10 installations in 6 states here in Navy Region Southwest. Here in San Diego County, Naval Base Coronado, in partnership with County of San Diego, has been able to obtain REPI funding to remove abandoned structures, debris, and invasive species, conduct soil remediation, and reestablish native plants and trees, creating net positive impact on Tijuana River flow, benefit the water quality, and mitigate erosion, as well as mitigate security concerns. So that has been a local San Diego County project. In addition, Naval Air Facility El Centro, in partnership with Trust for Public Lands, have been able to protect agricultural land, a very compatible land use with a naval air installation, in partnership also with the state of California's Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Funding. This has been a win-win solution again for the Navy as well as for the community. So there are many examples across the state of California that I can provide, but in the interest of time, I'll conclude my brief on REPI here. But if there's any of the agencies that are interested to learn more about the REPI and understand in depth some of those success stories, we will be happy to share that with you. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Gand. I know that the OLDCC funding where we brought in Mary Beth is eligible for our military installations in local jurisdictions. And then there's this REPI funding. Are there any other funding programs that we should be aware of or bring back as further discussion items as part of our work planning for this year? I think that it's really hard for us to, since we meet only on a quarterly basis, a lot of these conversations happen between meetings and we come back and share the information. And I don't know if everybody is engaged and you're aware of these funding opportunities, or if there's a better way for us to collaborate as these funding opportunities come, because deadlines are also rolling. And I don't know if anyone wants to speak to how we as a working group can work together in preparation for each agenda item in between meetings, or if there's a way that we can add these to our agenda meetings moving forward.
I think the old CC and the REPI program fundings are wonderful, and we're hoping to expand those opportunities going forward and build off a lot of the work that we've already done, particularly with the REPI program. The REPI program authority has expanded in recent years, and so it's moved from just being easement acquisition to natural resources management and resilience, which is really broad. And so that allows us to really expand our partnerships and potential funding. Another potential funding source that we've been discussing lately with the Federal Highway Administration has been the access to federal lands transportation funding sources. So we've had some kind of great meetings about that, and Federal Highway Administration has kind of highlighted that San Diego County is not using any of those funds, and that there's potential opportunities to use those funds in areas where there's federally or publicly accessible federal lands. So not necessarily military installations, but we are co-located with a lot of federal lands, such as Cabrillo National Monument, and our wildlife refuge system. So those are some potential opportunities to look at going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. And in terms of process, do the local jurisdictions reach out to Navy Region Southwest because you guys are the points of contact, or is that something that this forum should prioritize? Because I know that recommendations is really important too.
For old CC and REPI, I would recommend reaching out to the installations and to MUSCA directly. And then for Federal Highway, I would recommend that SANDAG take the lead.
Thank you. And so this slide highlights a few key topics that we did hear over the course of the tours that we have been doing at each of the bases. We brought in a few agenda items. I don't know if this group wants to develop an action item list that we'd like to highlight it and focus on over the rest of this 2024, or I don't know if anybody has anything to add to this, but we're hoping to have more focus with our agenda items as we move forward. And if you guys do have any questions or comments, we can open up for discussion. But I just wanted to highlight that this is what we heard. This is what we're bringing in as agenda items. We want these meetings to be very helpful to you and less educational, or we want to educate you on what's going on, but also have more dialogue and discussion on what we can do together as to make these agendas more effective for all of you. And I'll hand it back to Chair.
Okay. Thank you, April. Any comments from members about thoughts of what you've heard so far? Okay. We learned a lot going to these base tours. The airport connection certainly is a project that we want the military to weigh in, because there's talk of, is it a north coming in from the north? Is it coming in from the south? Is it going to be elevated over existing grade? Is it going to be at grade? Is it going to be run by a new agency? Is it going to be run by MTS? And these are all questions that still have to be resolved, but certainly to the extent that they impact the military presence around the airport area, we want to hear from the military, because this is such a big project. You'd hate to build it and then say, oh, you know, this military base says, that's kind of a problem for us for whatever reason. So it's really important you have the option to voice your concerns. I think you can start with Mariella to say, as a gatekeeper, to say, hey, here's who you can talk to, or she can point you to somebody. So the housing, that's kind of a passion of mine. We talked last meeting about OLDCC grants potentially being eligible for some of this transit-oriented development housing. MTS is building transit-oriented developments. There's still, I think, 2 or 3 in the pipeline, and there's a potential for some of the housing units to be set aside specifically for military for the 55-year deed restricted part of that project in exchange for an OLDCC grant. That is kind of important in today's world where the E1 to E4 don't always have the housing ability to get market rate housing, and certainly to get into an affordable housing project because of the grant money essentially subsidizing some of that rent would be a win for both the occupancy of the area, the value of having military members in your community is a plus, and the affordability for them, which kind of goes towards mission readiness as well. So some things that we're working on behind the scenes. But certainly, as you see this list, if you have anything that you have a question on or would like to talk to somebody in a specific area, start with Mariella. She'll be your gatekeeper, and we'll go from there. Okay, I think we should take time to look for public comments on this item. And Tessa, do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. We have one public commenter on this item, the original draw. Please go ahead.
It's crazy to hear you guys talk about all these things with the military and, mission readiness, and you're talking about climate impacts, climate change impacts, and harming the efforts to remain mission ready. Going and, touring the bases, and you're talking about quality of life and safety and all of these things. And then we just ignore actually what's happening, right in our faces. And none of this stuff is going to matter. I mean, you're never going to save the climate. And it's, man-made weather warfare is always going to be affecting your ability to do that because you're working against something that's happening against the people. It's a conspiracy that's going across, the world that is taking place that nobody wants to acknowledge as well. And, it's just like when you want to, remain mission ready, I mean, you should be preparing for the destruction of a nation because it's being helped facilitated through the ignoring of it. And when we do that, it's like none of this stuff is going to matter here soon when we have 5,000 people crossing a day. And when that increases beyond that, because San Diego has now become the main hub. And it's like you want to do all these things that, are just a bunch of busy work because, again, you're never going to make any impacts that are going to change when people modify the weather and when they seed the clouds and when they're putting chemicals in the sky to, and heavy metals to block the sun or do whatever. And, we can't even be serious about what's going on in our nation. And so by ignoring it, it's like none of this stuff is going to matter when there's a civil war, if that's what's going to happen. And it very well could. And I think you should be very concerned about that instead of just ignoring it and pretending like none of this is going on and spending time pretending you're going to save the climate and, you want to be mission ready. Then that's how you do it, is you acknowledge what's really going on.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Susan, for a good presentation. Thank you, April. We'll go on to our next item, item number 4. And as I'm getting ready to introduce this item, Sam and Jacqueline from SANDAG can take their place at the table and get ready. During our base tours, we've heard several concerns about pedestrian safety adjacent to the bases. So Sam and Jacqueline are going to present SANDAG's Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. Sam and Jacqueline, I will give you the floor.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Chair and working group members. As already mentioned, my name is Sam Sanford. I'm joined today by Jacqueline Sisk. We're members of the Integrated Transportation Team under SANDAG's Regional Planning Division. So thank you for having us here today. We've been working on this long time.
Just want to check to make sure your microphone's on.
Yeah,
Okay,
It's
great.
green.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm too far away. Is that any better? Okay. We've been working on a regional Vision Zero action plan for a few months now. And today we finally get to come to this group and give you an update on it and tell you some of the elements that have been recently completed and next steps on this document itself. Really the key tie-in with this working group is, our public roads are traversed by service members as they're commuting to and from base installations, from staff as well, and also the leisurely trips. So this regional approach to planning is looking at our roadway system from agnostic of ownership. So it's not looking as an owning agency might say, this belongs to city X, and then it goes to Caltrans, then it goes to the county. As a member of the public, as service members travel, they're not thinking about, oh, this undercrossing is Caltrans facilities, now I'm going into the San Diego County. We just travel. And so we want to have a safe transportation system that is understood by all, accessible to all, advances mobility, and everyone gets home safe. So in today's presentation, we're going to quickly go over some background and overview, talk through some of the efforts that have been completed to date on public engagement, benchmarking, which is essentially looking at the maturity model, draft summary statistics. What are we seeing in our region? What are some of the challenge areas with regards to traffic safety? And then two of the data products, the safety focus network and then a systemic safety network, identifying locations where we want to focus some of our attention across our region. And last but not least, next steps. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jacqueline.
Thank you, Sam. So we'll get into the background of Vision Zero. A little reminder that this is a combination of projects, policies, and programs. It's aimed to equip local jurisdictions to advance their safety across the region. And some jurisdictions in the San Diego region are doing a great job in this effort with safety programming, and others have not. So this effort is designed to help them identify locations and safety solutions or projects that then they can then apply for federal funding to advance their programming within their jurisdictions. So 3 years ago, the U.S. Department of Transportation announced a new funding source called Safe Streets and Roads for All. This funding source is $1 billion a year, at least for 5 years, and it supports planning efforts like this one. SANDAG was very fortunate to be in a successful application with the City of Vista and La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians. They are currently working on their own local level plans. In addition to planning funds, the Safe Streets and Roads for All also has a implementation funds pot that has significant requirements to qualify for implementation funds. The proposed projects must be included in a qualifying plan and meet certain elements. The Regional Vision Zero Action Plan is meant to serve as the document. Once this plan is complete, then local jurisdictions can point to this document and say that the project is identified in this plan and therefore qualifies for implementation dollars under the US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Today, we really get into the outreach engagement and the data analysis that our consultant team has begun. So on the screen here, we're going to look at two graphs and where we stand right now statewide and across the San Diego region. The top chart illustrates statewide fatalities. We have seen an increase in fatalities despite a lot of efforts in safety efforts. The trends are going the wrong direction. Unfortunately, our county is not exempt from this trend. So if you look at the bottom chart, you'll see that those bars also generally increase as we go across time. This is why we are working towards establishing a regional safety program. We're happy to announce that one of the first steps in setting up a regional safety program is gathering the necessary data. In doing so, we worked with multiple divisions within SANDAG, and in addition to that, we also had a lot of coordination and external engagement with all jurisdictions and with the California Highway Patrol to create a public-facing dashboard. And we use statewide integrated traffic reporting system, SWITR's data, going back to 2006. Data is gathered anytime an officer responds to a crash on site. We all travel throughout the region, so we want to share a data platform that is easily accessible and easy to digest. On the screen, you can see a QR code there that will lead you directly to our open data portal where traffic safety dashboard currently lives. So for public engagement updates, our team has been having ongoing public engagement and outreach. SANDAG had a series of outreach events throughout the region, and in addition to that, we contracted with community-based organizations to get involved with their service areas to help engage with these similar efforts. We worked with our community-based organization and our consultant team to develop an engaging pop-up toolkit, which you see on the screen there. And it helps the public to provide input and on their preferences on how they want to move about San Diego and provide safer options to move around the San Diego region. The public is able to contribute their feedback with these stickers, and it's a nice tactile way for the public to get involved. And as you can see on the screen as well, that the kids really enjoyed the stickers at these events. This is a great way to engage the community and also provide an educational opportunity on safety as well. In the winter, we wrapped up a digital engagement through SANDAG Safer Streets website, where there was an interactive map and the public was able to drop pins and also place a comment where they saw a safety concern and where there may be gaps within the network. This was a successful tool, and we nearly reached 3,000 comments, and we're currently analyzing all of those comments and that data to incorporate that into our plan. In addition to SANDAG and the community-based organization public outreach events, we also have quarterly technical advisory group meetings. This is a group that is comprised of members from various interdisciplinary backgrounds. And we also have local agency project development team meetings where we meet with staff from each of the jurisdictions and talk through in a more detailed level with this plan. We've currently had 3 rounds of project development team meetings with local jurisdictions. We have continuous engagement in our working group meetings. So thank you all for letting us be here today to present to you on our safety updates. And we have been also going to policy advisory committees as well, ultimately working towards wrapping up the details of the plan. One of the major products being developed in the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan is the benchmark assessment and action items. This benchmark assessment uses nationwide standards of model safety programs. Our consultant team reviewed SANDAG's existing safety policies, programs, and projects and evaluated them against the elements listed on the screen. The evaluation determined what existing strategies are most effective to reduce severe crashes and where there may be gaps in the existing regional safety program. From this benchmark work, the consultant team will develop a prioritized list of actions for inclusion in the Vision Zero Action Plan for SANDAG to implement to further support the regional safety efforts. And with that, I'll pass it off to my colleague, Sam Sanford, to jump into the data elements.
Thank you, Jacqueline. All right, so now we get to get a little bit heavier into the data side. And so I mentioned initially, we first kicked off with getting a database together of all the crash information that we had across the region. Then we needed to look at that crash information. What is it telling us? So one of the first products that the product team came up with was sifting through all those data and finding out what were some of the more challenging areas, what was rising to the top in the statistics. So not to go through each one of these, but if I start with an example in the bottom right, that 49% of fatal or serious injury crashes occur within roads that have 4 or more lanes. So first we start getting correlations with roadway features, like the size, the geometries of the features to see, are there connections there? Looking up from there, 78% of fatal or serious injury crashes occur on roads with posted speed limits of 35 miles per hour or higher. So again, we're looking at correlation of roadway features. If I go across to the left, 27% of auto-only fatal and serious injury crashes involve the driver under the influence. So now we start to get into behavioral aspects as well. And then if we continue to the left, 34% of fatal serious injury crashes occur near multifamily housing. And then we start bringing in land use context. So this is just to give you an example of the types of data that we brought together. So we brought together the crash data, roadway features, behavioral pieces where we could pull that from the crash data, and also land use. This helps inform some of the networks that we'll dive into in the subsequent slides. I should say that this data is from 2018 to 2022. This is for everything in the region with the exception of access-controlled freeways. So 2 of the major approaches we took on the left-hand side, we set up a regional safety focus network. And this is looking back in time at concentrations of crashes, or where we see, and particularly we're looking at fatal and serious injury crashes. This is the goal of Vision Zero, is to get to 0 fatalities or serious injuries on our roadways. On the right-hand side, we have a different network called Systemic Safety Network. This is more proactive. This is looking for those correlations where we see risk factors, a risk-based approach, where we have locations that have multiple risk factors compiled together. So I gave you the example of a roadway with the speed limit 35 miles an hour or more. If that were the only risk factor, that's not going to make it to this network. But if you have 5 or more of those risk factors in one location, that would come together to be a higher risk and be a part of that network. So this way we're looking at both the reactive approach with the regional safety focus network, and then the proactive and trying to get ahead of crashes before they occur with the systemic safety network. So what do these actually give us? Looking first at the safety focus network, we're able to find that 54% of fatal and serious injury crashes occur on just 6% of the regional transportation network. So over half of our crashes, of our fatal and serious injury crashes, occur on a relatively small portion of our transportation network. Now, our transportation network is over 10,000 miles, so it's very large. It's hard to know where to start. This helps us know where to start. It takes us 6 or 10,000 miles and whittles it down to 600 some odd miles. Looking across the bottom, 59% of fatal and serious injury crashes in that network involve a pedestrian. 54% of those fatal and serious injury crashes involve a cyclist, and then 49% involve senior or youth. So the map itself for the safety focus network, and you can see the statistics off to the left-hand side, it's 653 miles is what's shown up on the map on the right. It is distributed across the entire region. And we looked at this by all 4 modes. We did look at motor vehicle, motorcycle, bicycle, and pedestrian separately to find out where those crashes are occurring and where there's concentrations of them. And since there's quite a bit of difference between the western third of our county versus the eastern 2/3 as far as land use, our typical usage of roadways, speed limits, context, we actually looked at those and had 2 different sets of thresholds and analyses and brought them together into one map. It wasn't one set for the entire county. But I do want to walk us through the 4 modes that I just mentioned to show the distribution across the region. So if we start with the pedestrian mode in yellow, you see it's in mostly urbanized areas, a couple concentrations in a few jurisdictions. pretty well distributed along the western third. When you bring in bicycles, it stays fairly similar as far as the western third, but you do see some other spots starting to pop up on the map. When we bring in motorcycles, it's very distributed across the entire region. A lot of the western or eastern 2/3 is now on this map. And then last but not least, the motor vehicle safety focus network. So the map that I started with the black lines, that was the composite version. That brought all 4 modes together. And that's essentially the bulk of the safety focus network that has a 54% of fatal and serious injury crashes on just 6% of the network. From this, we'll go into a prioritization process to find out of those 653 miles, which ones would be the best, the most advantageous for the region to start addressing first. So that's the safety focus network. Now jumping to the systemic safety network. They all start blending together. If you say safety enough times, it gets very confusing. So this is the proactive approach. This is where we're looking for concentrations of features, attributes, characteristics that have a strong correlation with risk. All right, so this is, again, roadways, when you have 5 or more of these risks at a minimum, then they become on this map. So this network covers all jurisdictions across the county. So all 18 cities and the county. I should have mentioned prior, the safety focus network, there's one city that was not on that did not have that concentration of crashes. That was Solana Beach. All the other cities were included in the county. And this one, all cities are included on this. So safety grants, there was a talk on previous item about funds and funds available. So a couple of the key ones to keep in mind are the grant that's funding this program, this plan is the US DOT's Safe Streets and Roads for All. So that is eligible to local jurisdictions, to county. Bizarrely enough, state DOTs are not eligible for that. But it is for cities and regional agencies like SANDAG, and there are implementation dollars, there's construction dollars. It is competitive, and about $1 billion a year for the next few years, unless Congress will reauthorize some additional funds for that. That's the newest game, essentially, on the streets for safety. One of the more traditional fund sources that's been around for longer is the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's administered by Caltrans. It is a federal fund source. And that one is it does have like a benefit cost ratio that essentially if you have a history of crashes near a base, near a facility, that could be a good contender. They're also looking each year that I've seen this program updated, they have more systemic pieces. So they'll have a set aside portion that is not necessarily a benefit cost ratio competitive analysis. They'll look more at, is there a systemic piece such as improvements for pedestrian access, because there's a challenge in many urban areas in California with pedestrian fatalities. Office of Traffic Safety, or OTS, also has a grant program that's looking more on enforcement and behavior and education, but they do have a program out there. They do not fund implementation, but there's a lot to be done and benefited from that element as well. And then active transportation grants. So there's the statewide call that goes through the California Transportation Commission, and there's also a regional call, essentially a formula comes to SANDAG, and SANDAG administers a competitive grant through our region as well. So I wanted to run through those, make sure people are aware of it, of those options and opportunities. Next steps for the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. We are wrapping up the systemic safety analysis. You saw kind of the draft network on one of the prior slides. The second bullet on here is a safety improvements toolkit. This is where really the aim of this plan is to get it so jurisdictions, the owning agencies, can advance their projects and have all the information that they need. So in that toolkit, they would have access to those 2 networks I showed earlier, in addition to the 3,000 plus comments that Jacqueline mentioned earlier, to get that, since those have a location-based information, we can correlate those with locations on the map, along with countermeasures or safety solution recommendations and what those improvements would anticipate it be. all together in one spot. So that way staff has the material they need to go to their council and recommend a project moving forward. Ultimately, the regional Vision Zero action plan is looking to wrap up here in the next few months, and stakeholder outreach and other implementations of this plan and follow-up items will continue really through 2024 and then on into a safety program. So that concludes our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks, Sam and Jacqueline. Members, any questions or comments? Tony.
Thank you for that overview. I'm looking forward to looking at the actual data when you make it available to the cities. I have a question about e-bikes. E-bikes are something that we're having issues with in Coronado, and I know a lot of coastal cities are as well. I'm wondering how you quantified accidents with e-bikes. I know one of our challenges that when we started looking at the data locally, we were not separating out e-bikes from bicycles. And I don't know if that's the case in other cities as well. We've now started doing that so that we can, better quantify that issue. But we do know that we've got a problem with lots of e-bikes on our streets and just, the fact that they're moving at a much quicker pace than a bicycle would. So just curious how those were looked at.
Well, that's encouraging to hear that Coronado is already starting that process. At a regional scale, there is not a data set that has that distinction between e-bike versus non-e-bike. Essentially, we're using the data that comes from an officer when they respond to a scene, triple nickel form. It's a state standardized form for all crashes, and that has not been updated yet to include some distinction between an e-bike and non-e-bike. We are exploring opportunities where we can get into the crash narrative. That is a much more intensive process to look at the crash narrative and see what an officer has written down as far as the preceding actions and what transpired. But that's work to come in the future. Duly noted. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Mike.
This is maybe a little along the same line as Tony's question, but I think all of us know that unlike car crashes, which are well documented, many bicycle and pedestrian incidents, non-fatal ones, are not well documented. The person gets knocked down, everybody says, "Oh, you okay?" and they walk away. Nonetheless, it was a safety incident. And I'm guessing that your public outreach, where you asked people to comment on specific areas of concern, would be the way that you would get at those kinds of things. So then the question is whether or not you're able to correlate the things that people are identifying as safety issues with the documentation that's based on fatalities, which are well documented. And are you able then to see that there are areas of concern that maybe haven't yet produced fatalities, but have a potential for that?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to capture with that online comment tool. But keeping in mind that the way it's set up for the online comment tool, it is essentially people volunteering to share information. So it's not statistically valid that we're able to deduce exactly what's happening on the roadways. It is information that we can pass along to the owning agencies so they could see if they have a segment of the safety focus network, then they could also pull in those comments and see, oh, we had 20 comments in this area and 3 of them were concerns about near misses. That's the way we're able to leverage it at this point. Other ideas that have been shared are there are newer data sets as cars become more connected. Some data vendors are looking at issuing data that has hard braking or swerve, essentially in the onboard computers that's shared, or potentially through cell phones, anonymized data as well. So that's something we're looking into. We'd like to capture more of that near miss information because that would be wonderful to know, like, where do we have concentrations of challenges as people are navigating the system before something horrible occurs.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Jim and then I'll go to Ricky.
And this is partial curiosity, and I may have just missed it, but I think you said one of the statistics was well over half of the fatal and serious injury accidents take place on about 6% of the road network. Where is that?
So it is distributed across the entire region. There's short segments. So essentially they did analysis, our project team did analysis of a moving window where they would take, they put the points for all the crashes by severity, by fatal and serious injury, and then would do a running sum of those as they move through it. So it is dispersed through every jurisdiction with the exception of Solana Beach.
And are there any commonalities or variables that kind of jump out within that 6% segment?
That's where we were able to pull some of those systemic safety ideas of like speed limits, geometry such as roadway configuration, land use, and then to a certain extent behavioral aspects as well. So that was some of the building blocks to both of those networks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, have you considered or looked into some of the existing crowdsourced information like bikemaps.org? They have some additional crowdsourced information about bike collisions and near misses. And then also, could you speak a little bit more to the exposure factors you're using? You mentioned roadway width, but I'm thinking for the segments that you're talking about, are you also factoring in distance to safe crossing and signalized intersection?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So and thank you for the questions. We looked at a few different ideas for how we could bring in crowdsourced data. Essentially, what we ended up with was that social pinpoint site, essentially people going in and self-reporting what they had concerns with. That way we could actually gather and categorize the data. So it wasn't just, do you feel safe or unsafe in a specific facility? They could actually give us much more detail about it. Feel unsafe due to poor lighting, or there's a gap in the network right here. So we got much more detailed comment than we might have through some other tools, but we continue to look at and evaluate if there's a new source out there that could be beneficial as we go through. This is the initial set of Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. We anticipate doing regular update cycles, and so we'll look and see if there's other opportunities for other sets in the future. On the exposure side, we brought in a level of traffic stress analysis, and that was helpful in that we were able to, this was a component of the active transportation plan update. And so these two efforts were going on in parallel. And so we were able to leverage that work and bring that in. And essentially that looked at essentially there's a standardized way of assessing stress for active transportation, like number of lanes, the speed, and other mixes of traffic that are associated with it. And so we were able to bring that in. So we have essentially these LTS scores of 1 through 4 that we're able to bring in. So that's kind of how we did it. I don't know that we had anything else as far as distance to crossing, but it was roadway width, speed, and volume were brought in.
Sam, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. You mentioned it kind of just a minute ago about updates and future data collection cycles. I was just wondering if that's something that's programmed or if that's something that's going to be aspiring to do in the future. And the second, can all the jurisdictions then access that data in some tabular form and shapefile form? And then is ARGIS involved at all getting any direct information from the law enforcement agencies?
All right, good questions. Thank you. So I'll go reverse order here. Can't speak with my hands too much up here. I'll knock over the microphone. So we've interfaced with ARGIS on a couple ideas. One challenge that we have with safety data, it is 2 years old by the time it's final. So there's a long lag. When an incident occurs, an officer reports, it gets up to CHP into a standardized database and then is considered final. That's a 2-year work window until we're able to say that's final, it's not going to change anymore. We can run statistics on it. With ARGIS having a connection with all the jurisdictions, police departments, and CHP, there's an opportunity there to say, can we get those crash reports earlier, albeit that they would be provisional, they would not be final. So that discussion has been ongoing. We need to work out some details of how that would work. That's a dream that we could make that, because that would be near real time. It could be monthly updates, which would be much more satisfactory than 2 years old. We'd have to work through what the update process would look like. On the prior question we had on this program is a safety program. So it's going from plan, essentially a project to develop this plan into a program. So we're set through the fiscal budget's going this Friday to the board to keep this program going in through fiscal 2025. Keep on exploring how do we best use finite resource to advance safety. So whether it be through supporting projects, supporting jurisdictions, figuring out how that is. So that's ongoing discussion. And then access to the data. So for all jurisdictions, and can open it up to base staff as well, we have a site that we are building right now that has all the data for these networks with the comments and all kind of the background information. And eventually that will be the tool to have the countermeasures as well. And that site at this point is access controlled, but we are working through the process to get access to all jurisdictions as well.
Sam, thank you for the presentation. Quick question. The traffic safety dashboard, does that include bike paths?
Yes.
Okay.
So if an officer responded, then it'll be on that sheet or in that database. So I could qualify my answer a little bit. If there was an incident with a cyclist, a solo cyclist, loses control, but self-extracts, nobody responds to that, then it will not be in that system. So there's a little bit of a gray area there on, we know everything is underreported. You know, some people are going to move away before an officer arrives on scene. And then if it is a separated facility, if an officer was able to access that facility to actually make a report.
And how back years you go to start capturing that data?
Yeah, 2006. So CHP only holds, I believe, 6 years. So we actually have a nice repository for our region, more than the state does at this point. So we're going to be good stewards of the data.
So does it also include jurisdictional data like sheriff, city of Coronado, police? Okay. Again, probably work in progress. Just zooming in on slide number 13, I don't see the green line between Coronado and Imperial Beach and other jurisdictions. Piggyback on what just Tony mentioned, you know, we also have other, I know specifically Imperial Beach has had a fatality at the bike path.
Okay.
And then just quickly, because just putting on the dashboard, I don't see one either. It comes out as a 0. That's why I wanted to make sure that, you know, it's included. And then somebody mentioned, is there a way to do the self-reporting as well? And you spoke a little bit about that. So I think that would be very helpful. Because specifically in Imperial Beach, you know, we have crossover of several jurisdictions. We have Chula Vista, San Diego, Imperial Beach, you know, the state agency, and then we have Coronado that we all share a bike path. And, you know, Coronado or IB or any other agency would do their efforts, but I think collaborating together would go much way better. And then if you can just speak a little bit on your outreach, what are the next steps?
So outreach is wrapping up at this point. We're looking to conclude the document itself, really this spring, summer timeframe. And so the outreach is coming to an end. We, as Jacqueline mentioned, we contracted with several community-based organizations for the in-person outreach. And then SANDAG held its own events as well. And essentially we would go to different facilities. Like we went to Oceanside, went to different parts of the county to interface with people and understand what their concerns are and what they want to see in our roadways. So I think we have one more event that a CBO is completing, or was it complete last weekend?
It was completed on the 4th of May.
Okay.
So all the CBOs have concluded their outreach events. They were contracted to host up to 2 outreach events for this planning process.
So going forward, other future opportunities will be as we do updates to this plan, as we do evaluation and monitoring on the impact of the plan, we'll have opportunities at those stages.
One last one, sorry. So If we would request one, our agency, is that opportunity available?
Request a,
Outreach to our community?
yeah, and we've actually had a couple jurisdictions ask us if we essentially, with the community-based organizations and their consultant team, developed a pop-up kit for surveying the public. And quite a few jurisdictions have asked us if they could check it out. And we said, let us finish our outreach first. And that would be, I think, probably the recommended approach is to do it that way. And I guess we just wrapped up.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, Sam and Jacqueline, I don't think there was a question tossed at you that you didn't have an answer for. So you certainly are subject matter experts in this, and we appreciate your experience. I have a couple of things. The outreach events, I don't know if the military agencies would like to have an outreach event specifically for the military agencies that had an interest.
I'm definitely interested. I'm trying to think what the best way to do such an outreach event would be. And I'm very interested in seeing any correlation between, the entrances to our gates and within our military communities, if there are higher percentages of safety factors. But I definitely would like to find a way to have an outreach event that can be effective.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to connect Anna with Mariella and Sam, that you kind of reserve a spot maybe, or so to speak, for the military in case they find a request they want to put in for an event. Does that sound good? You mentioned the site access, this website access for the data portal. It's controlled for now. Would the military agencies be one of those agencies that could have access to look outside their bases on data specifically or housing developments?
Yeah, definitely. We just need email addresses and then we can get the process going. Essentially, we just have to go through a process with our IT system and get them set up with access.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
I can work with Mariella on getting those names and we can go through that process.
Perfect. I'll look to Mariella to blast out some kind of information to our military members to say, hey, here's a great portal for you to look at incidents just outside your bases or your housing places like Murphy Canyon or Sierra Mesa, things like that, because they may want to do that. Piggybacking on Don and Tony's question about ARGIS and e-bikes, I would suggest that would be a good topic for the Public Safety Committee to ponder. They have a chiefs subcommittee, and certainly they could talk about the pros and cons of segregating e-bike incidents versus non-e-bike, because I'm sure there's complications and considerations, but that would be an excellent topic for the Public Safety Committee. I think that covers all my questions. Any other thoughts, comments? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you for an excellent presentation and for having the answer to everything.
Chair, I'd like to take public comment on this item.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
The original draw, please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. When we're talking about Vision Zero, and I know you guys probably think me and many people that will call into different meetings are crazy, but there is a United Nations Agenda 21, 2030, 2050. And it's the whole sustainability thing, but it's not about saving the planet. It's about total control. And so the idea is that you got to take control of all the resources and, modes of transportation and do all of these things. And it's under the guise of safety. And that's what happens. All I have to do is pay attention to the things you guys say and the way that you do it. And of course, we want people to be safe and we want, people not to die in crashes. But when the plan is to get people out of their cars into public transportation and or walking or biking into like a densely populated area, per se a 15-minute city, which is what they call them, and they're doing them all over the world, it doesn't have anything to do with safety. It's about controlling the movements of the people, but you demonize all of the things in the process so that you change the behaviors, just like you guys are saying, we got to change the behaviors of people to get them into this new way. Right. And we're going to get to 0 deaths. There's no way you guys could ever accomplish that. And you will never get to 0 carbon. We're carbon based. You can't, all life is carbon based. So the more that we try and mitigate something like that, we're trying to erase ourselves in the process and enslave each other in the process. And so it's sad to think that, you know, we can do all of these things that are potentially like possibly going to maybe save a few lives, but people die. That's part of life. And you're never going to be able to control that. And the more you try and control it, the worse it's going to get. And so I would just hope that you guys could open up your minds to something different and understand that you're being used to implement these things, and it will enslave you too, because you're not outside of it. I mean, just look into it.
Your time expired, and that concludes the public comments.
Great, thank you. All right, let's move on to our last item, which is item 5, the Housing Acceleration Program update. And while Thomas is getting ready to set up here, this is going to be an update on the Housing Acceleration Program, or HAP, funded through the state's Regional Early Action Planning Grants. Thomas DeFranco from SANDAG is here to give us an update on this program. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Military Working Group members. My name is Thomas DeFranco, and I'm a regional planner on SANDAG's Sustainable Communities team. Today, I'm here to provide you an update on SANDAG's Housing Acceleration Program, or HAP program. SANDAG launched HAP with Regional Early Action Planning. There we go. With Regional Early Action Planning, or REAP, grant funding from the state. REAP funding was one-time grant funding for planning activities that accelerate housing production and facilitate compliance in jurisdictions' implementation of the sixth cycle of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. In 2019, the California legislature passed AB 101, and this bill provided one-time grant funding through HCD to metropolitan planning organizations like SANDAG to support local jurisdictions' housing element implementation efforts. SANDAG secured $6.8 million in formula funding in 2020 under REAP 1.0, which facilitated the development and implementation of the program. In addition, REAP 2.0 funding was made available as part of the 2021 California Comeback Plan through AB 140. REAP 2.0 builds on the success of REAP 1.0 and expands the program focus by integrating housing and climate goals and allows for broader planning implementation investments, including infrastructure investments. So today, I'm going to review what we accomplished with REAP 1.0 and go over next steps for REAP 2.0. To determine how REAP 1.0 funding would best benefit our region, SANDAG engaged with member agencies and stakeholders to better understand the housing challenges and identify areas where we could best support local jurisdictions. The word cloud up at the top right shows those key themes that we heard, which included funding, education and training, and collaboration. The feedback we received helped us develop our HAP, and staff worked closely with the consultant on the pro-housing best practices study to guide our program as well. The report established a baseline of information about regional housing trends and outlined pro-housing best practices and recommendations, which also helped shape the program. The HAP strategy, published in 2022, outlines goals, policies, and actions to accelerate affordable, fair, and sustainable housing production across the region. It's a guide to help SANDAG address the housing crisis and reach our regional housing and climate goals. It includes near-term and continuous implementation actions. SANDAG's REAP 1.0 strategy includes 3 core activities. 1, local jurisdiction support, offering technical resources and assistance to support our jurisdictions. 2, data analysis and policy resources, compiling data, policy tools, resources, and best practices for local jurisdictions. 3, regional initiatives, providing education, leadership, and funding opportunities to accelerate housing investments. And I'll provide more detail on each of the strategies in the following slides. To begin, a large component of SANDAG's REAP 1.0 funded activities is grant funding directly to the local jurisdictions. In 2022, we awarded $1.9 million for 7 planning projects that accelerate housing production and facilitate implementation of RHNA. More information about these individual projects seen on the screen is available on our website. In order to further accomplish our core strategy of local jurisdiction support, we also developed our incredibly popular Technical Assistance, or TA, program. The TA program is designed with multiple components seen on the screen, which cater to the varying needs and capacities of our jurisdictions. I'll highlight a few of the components of the TA program and offer examples of the toolkits and data resources we've created through this program. A significant portion of the resources so far has been focused on supporting the implementation of recently adopted state housing laws. For example, we developed a toolkit for AB 2011 and SB 6, which provides an overview of these bills along with implementation checklists for city staff. In addition to these resources, SANDAG developed in-person training sessions and online webinars where staff can openly discuss their challenges and collaborate comfortably to find solutions. Our next regional training will be on the topic of land value capture later this May. For our next core strategy of data analysis and policy resources, SANDAG developed our Housing Policy and Planning Tool, or HPPT. SANDAG's HPPT is meant to be our online housing resource hub for policymakers, staff, and the public to support the implementation of housing elements. Since we started development of this tool last year, we've been actively engaging jurisdiction staff to develop this in a way that supports their needs and is useful to them. We currently have 7 different tools or products that you can see on the screen. They are the Affordable Housing Case Studies, our Housing Policy Resources, our Housing Element Compliance Report, our APR Housing Data Explorer, our ADU Report, the RENA Dashboard, and our anti-displacement strategies. The third HAP strategy is our regional initiatives, which includes studies, education, leadership, and funding opportunities to accelerate housing production. Through SANDAG's regional initiatives, we've built out a strong educational programming like our Housing Policy Leadership Academy. The Housing Policy Leadership Academy, or HPLA, is a 10-session course that provides a forum for industry leaders and housing policy professionals to explore the relationship between policy, planning, and housing development. The 2 cohorts that graduated in December of 2022 included 2 City Council and SANDAG board members, 6 policy advisors, 5 regional planners, 2 planning commissioner or planning group representatives, and 8 planning and housing department professionals representing 6 different jurisdictions. Another cohort, which will be graduating next week, include 1 City Council and SANDAG board member, 2 staffers, and 17 staff representing 8 different jurisdictions. The Housing Policy Bootcamp is a free course that provides HPLA graduates with the opportunity to dive deeper into leadership and coalition building strategies. SANDAG will be offering the bootcamp for the first time starting in the next couple of weeks. We've also held 6 policy forums that you can see on the screen here, which have been open to the public and that focused on housing policy issues and trends, and over 1,500 people have attended these events. To round out our regional initiatives, our capital mapping report and regional value capture study have identified funding sources and unique finance mechanisms that could be used throughout the region to support housing production and are available to our jurisdictions and the public as well. So that concludes our work with REAP 1.0, and now I'll switch gears to tell you about some of the work we're doing with REAP 2.0 and provide you the latest status update to the availability of the funds from the state. REAP 2.0 has 3 very specific objectives: accelerating infill development, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing VMT. But these objectives are somewhat on hold. On May 30th of 2023, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, approved SANDAG's full REAP 2.0 application, formally committing $43 million to our region. Since that time, SANDAG has moved forward with its proposed uses, including a suballocation of $12.3 million for 15 really cool projects to local jurisdictions. However, on January 10th of 2024, Governor Gavin Newsom announced a proposed budget that would cut $1.2 billion in total funding for housing programs, including a $300 million reversion, or half of the REAP 2.0 program. HCD, who administers the REAP 2.0 program, subsequently announced that they will only reimburse SANDAG for funding up to 25% of the initial $43 million award until the state budget is finalized later this summer. Given HCD's direction and the uncertainty of our budget, this means SANDAG is pausing many of the initiatives that I'm about to review with you today, including the HAP Cycle 2 grants. Recipients of this funding were alerted in February, and our grant and housing teams have been meeting one-on-one with all of the awardees on potential next steps. With that being said, I'll still be providing an overview of these really important efforts. And I think it's really important that you all are aware still of what we're doing. SANDAG engaged in robust outreach during 2022 to develop REAP 2.0 program priorities. And based on input received from local jurisdictions, elected officials, affordable housing developers, and tribal nations, SANDAG organized our planning implementation activities into 4 categories: continued local jurisdiction support, partnerships with the transit agencies, affordable housing development programs, and tribal partnerships. On the following slides, I'll walk through each of the proposed uses and some of the more significant proposed activities associated with them to demonstrate how SANDAG's strategies aim to accomplish the REAP 2.0 objectives. The first proposed use is local jurisdiction support. This program planned to provide grants and continued technical assistance for efforts to implement local jurisdictions' housing elements and accelerate the development of affordable housing. One of these largest activities is our HAP Cycle 2 grants, which I mentioned were on hold. In addition to the grants, funded activities included the continuation of policy forums and additional data and planning tools as well. The second activity is affordable housing development programs. Through this program, SANDAG was planning to establish an evergreen regional housing trust fund of $15 million to be leveraged with funding from other partners to directly support the finance and development of affordable housing. In addition to the trust fund, SANDAG allocated funding to support coordination on regional grant applications to programs like the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant, an analysis of housing finance models, and evaluating opportunities for development on public land. Under our third activity, our transit agency partnerships, SANDAG was collaborating with MTS and NCTD to support activities that specifically advance the redevelopment of land at their transit stations into affordable housing. Our partnership included funding a workforce housing study for transit workers, which is currently on hold. Our fourth and final activity is our tribal partnerships work. The SANDAG region contains 17 federally recognized tribes, the most of any county in the United States, and each tribe has unique housing needs. The $2 million allocation will complement each tribe's existing housing programs to meet both current as well as future housing needs. SANDAG is working closely with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association to further develop this program and assure that they are planning and building housing for their community. So what's next with our HAP program? Right now, our team is concluding our REAP 1.0 activities and will be finalizing and submitting our closeout report to HCD. Additionally, and probably most importantly, our team will continue to work with our leaders in Sacramento to advocate for the appropriation of housing funding in this year's state budget. Budget hearings and negotiations are taking place at the state level as we speak and will continue over the next few months. In the next few weeks, the governor will issue an updated budget proposal known as the May revision. The state budget will be enacted in June, but the legislature is able to pass appropriations bills until the end of August. And so SANDAG will continue to advocate for this critical funding and encourages you to do so as well. You can reach out to your state representatives, let them know the impacts and consequences that this reversion will have on your jurisdiction and our region, and urge them to strongly support the retention of REAP 2.0 funding. And that concludes my presentation today on the work we're doing in SANDAG's Housing Acceleration Program. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Before we go to member comments, let's check in with Tessa and see if we have any public comments.
We do have one public comment, the original draw. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I almost forgot to raise my hand. You know, it's sad to see all of the cuts that are happening across the board just for all of the things that we really need, you know, to provide people with housing. But it's also sad to see that a lot of the time spent when getting ready to provide housing goes towards pretending to save the climate. And so, you know, it makes the, I mean, you can't accelerate housing at that point. It actually goes backwards, and it keeps you from being able to build it. It takes a lot longer. In fact, it costs people more because they have to jump through all these hoops. And then when there's a revolving door of changes that happen as far as the policies and regulation and permitting goes, everybody's always kind of behind. And so you're never going to be able to keep up. And then you come to a place where all of a sudden there's all of these cuts and there's deficits, and, it's sad because it could have been, we could build housing a lot quicker if that's what the intention was. Like and with all the money that's been spent throughout the time, it's just like homelessness. If homelessness, like with the billions of dollars that gets thrown at things, you can't just keep getting money to throw at problems if they don't exist. So the problem has to continue to perpetuate. Otherwise, you have nothing to try and seek, right? And in that, people suffer because it's like, we care more about the planet than we do about the people that are needing the homes. Like you're more worried about, well, like if we build it this way, we're gonna save the planet. Like that seems like the focus over actually providing what needs to be provided for the communities. And it's just sad because it is an agenda. That is the United Nations plan that everybody, many places across the world are implementing. And people don't realize that it's intentional, and it's all of the problems, could be fixed in a pretty fast manner with all the money that is just thrown at stuff if it went into the right pockets, into the right programs.
Your time expired. That concludes the public comments.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from the members of the group? Done.
I wanted to raise one point. You mentioned the land value capture tool. Just from previous work in this field, working for DoD, this sounds an awful lot like the community partnership program, right? Trying to develop mutually beneficial solutions to reach the goals of shared aspirations of dealing with housing and the environment and safety issues on or off base. So it might be interesting to come back with the land value capture program to this working group specifically and talk about potential opportunities for DoD installations to partner with local governments on specific sites or pieces of real estate. I know this was done during the last rounds of BRAC. It's realignments and joint ventures were set up to deal with disposed lands. I'm wondering if there's any of those types of appetite for that type of conversation here locally.
That's a good point, because on one of our tours, I think it was down at Naval Base San Diego, we saw a public-private partnership of housing down there that worked out, a very classy looking piece of housing. So you're right, there are opportunities and we need more housing. Absolutely. Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, that concludes our item. Thank you, Thomas, for your expertise in this area. Okay, I think that takes us down to just some final concluding comments. Any final thoughts, questions before we adjourn? Okay, I'd like to thank April once again. April, we have just a gesture of thanks in the form of a card for you from the members. Thanks. How many years have you been serving this committee?
6 years.
6 years. Okay, well, there goes a lot of expertise, but you're not leaving the building. So I'm certainly, Mariella is going to be friends with you and make sure things move forward well. I've also like to recognize Councilman Mike Donovan. He's down from Coronado, member certainly interested in the military aspects of things happening in Coronado, and a member of MTS's board. Thank you for your counsel and your experience in both areas, both in Coronado and MTS. Nice to have you here. Okay, that brings us to an adjournment of this military working group meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, September 9th at 9 o'clock in the morning. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.